So in our rubber band car, you will notice that we seem to be missing a spacer at the front. So the front wheel, without a spacer, it can slide back and forth, which isn't going to be great. So we're going to design a spacer. We want to make sure that we're in the Part Studio tab. So Alt-T allows you to open up all the different tabs, and there is Part Studio 1. So we're going to make sure that that is open, and Alt-T will close that so that we can see what we're doing. We want to make sure that we're viewing it like this. Your right mouse button allows you to rotate. You want to make sure you're using a mouse because the touchpad is much harder to do. The zoom is your scroll wheel, and that's where you can zoom in and out. And holding the middle mouse button allows you to pan, which means moving the part side to side. There is a view cube in the top corner, so you can select different faces to be able to rotate it. So we want to click that corner so that we've got the front, right, and top. And we're going to zoom in here, and we'll select that face. So if you've accidentally clicked multiple things, just zoom out, click some blank space, and then you can click the face to select only it. The sketch is this button up here. Shift S will open the sketch. And now we're in the sketch mode, so we can do a drawing. This tool is the construction tool, the letter Q. So on your keyboard, if you press the letter Q, and if you press the letter U, that will open up the Use tool. So with the construction and Use tool open, I'm going to hold my mouse until I get that circle, and I've got an orange circle centered on the axle, and I'm going to click. So there is a construction circle. I'm going to use that to figure out my geometry. There's another button called the Offset tool, so it's the letter O. So I make sure my other tools are off. There's my Offset tool. I'm going to now click the Offset tool, and I'm going to click that circle, and it's going to create a circle. So 0.25 inches, what I want to do is this is going to be the inner diameter of my spacer, and I want it to be just a tiny bit bigger so that it will fit on. If it's the same size, then the objects, there's going to be so much friction it will be hard to put it on. So I'm going to just double click 0.25 and change that to 0.01 space IN. Again, that is 0.01 space IN. And I can just click somewhere, and now I've set an offset that is 0.01 inches. I'm going to turn on the offset tool again. Now I'm going to click that black circle. And again, 1/4 of an inch is fairly large, so I'm going to change that. Double click, and I'm going to pick 1/8. So 1/8, 1/8 space IN. So if I've done 1/8 space IN, it will do the math. And 1 divided by 8 is 0.125. And if I click and hit enter, there is my circle. So I now have a spacer. I'm in Sketch 14. I'm just going to rename that. So Sketch Spacer. And I have a couple of options. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click the extrude button, which is over here, Shift E. And when I extrude it, it automatically, because I was in that sketch, it automatically extrudes the spacer, which is great. It is blindly extruding it to a depth of 1 inch. I want to change that. So instead of blindly, I'm going to go up to a face, and I'm going to need to just zoom out and right click to rotate. And when I can see the wheel face on this side, I'm going to click once. And now it's going to extrude my spacer up to that face, which is the face of extrude 10. And my spacer is in there. So green check mark. And if I look on my things, I've added a new part. If I click on it, I can see it's part 17. I'm going to right click that and I am going to rename that. Actually, I'm going to go to Properties. And in Properties, change the name, Front Spacer. And the part number, put your initials for the part number, 01-14. We've created 13 parts in this already, so this will be our 14th part, and your initials are used to keep track of whose project this is. And 01 is just a convention that we use if we have multiple documents making up a really complex thing like a robot, then each document will have a different number so that we can keep track of where everything is. And just save that. Now our front spacer, we can right-click it, and what we can do is we can export it. And when we export it, we want to make sure that we change the name to include our initials. We want to make sure the format is STL, and we want to make sure the units are in millimeters. Again, the name, your initials, followed by front spacer, the format, STL, and the units, millimeters. And that should export our file, and that file is what we need to upload to Google Classroom. Alt-T opens up, and you can see there's the assembly, so assembly 1. We're going to open that up, and we'll Alt-T to hide the tab manager. And there's an insert button, and we're going to insert, and we can just search for front spacer. There's our front spacer. And it automatically puts it where we want it. The problem is, if you look over in the instances, you can see it's got the triad indicating that it can be moved around, which is not what we want. So what we're going to do is we're going to just move it out. And if we click this Fasten button, Fasten Mate, the letter M, what we can do is we can click this face, and if we hold down Shift, we can move our mouse around and be able to get the triad right there. So the triad, the green, red, and blue, so that indicates where the connection is going to be. So it's going to be connection there. And we can hold our mouse over here, and because there's not as many points, we can do that. And you'll notice that it's kind of the wrong way. So that's where this flip button comes into play, and a green check mark, and we're done. So there's our spacer. We need to do the same process to add a second spacer. And because our spacer, if I move my mouse over here, I can click, and that way it's not in that same position, and I can do the same process. So there's the Fasten Mate. This time I'm going to use the wheel. And because I don't want to have it in the part, I can actually look at it from this direction, and you can see the way the angle, the blue, red, and green are oriented, it will actually position it in the proper orientation. So there's two different ways that we just covered. So there's my part. I've inserted them. If I look at the bill of materials over on the right, there's a set of icons, the BOM table. You should see there's your front spacer, and it's got all the information. Now it is missing material. So if we double click, I don't know if you have access to Julia's materials, which I do, which I would use 3D printed PLA. You might just have the Onshape, and in that case, we can just do a search. And there is PLA, so we'll select PLA and green check mark. And now we know that our part is going to be 3D printed because it's going to be made out of PLA plastic, and we know how many parts we need to 3D print, and we have everything organized.